Hello. It's been a while. It's been like 12 weeks. I looked it up. Since then, so much has happened, it's kind of crazy. Share this, as I said I would. Alright, cool. Thank you, Facebook, for telling me I'm live. I saw somebody. Yeah, it's been quite a while. Actually, after my last live, I was actually sick. I ended up with COVID 2 days after that, or like actually having a positive test for COVID. That was sucky. Cool. See people popping in. Hope you all are doing well. I'm hoping to start doing these again so that yeah, we can all just kind of hang out like we were doing. I mean, August, I think we were doing a live almost every single night, which is pretty cool. I like it. Let's see here. Actually, show me the link or no? No, my own Facebook Live won't show me that I'm live. That's cool. Awesome Facebook. Anyway, yeah. So the new book, Fallen King. Fun story with this one. I wrote the majority of it out of country. I wrote most of this in Bali and on a train between Tokyo and Kyoto. So yeah, this is a very much a different book. I've already got the second one written, and I'm like a fourth of the way through the third. So rolling through pretty quickly. This is set before the Rogue Elf, around the time of Stormborn Saga, really. Maybe actually right before Stormborn, based on some of the events. So yeah, all set in the desert of Los Sands. I actually have a Twitch set up, but yeah, I haven't used it. I have it, but yeah, I haven't used it. It's even branded for my Dwymhar Realm stuff. So what I'll probably end up doing is streaming to Facebook and to Twitch because I have a program for that. So that's what I'm thinking about doing at least, especially if I'm going to do it regularly like this, or as I hope to. But anyway, you are here. I did share it in the group. I told you I would send you a link. So yeah. All right. So just pulled up. You would think I have an actual copy of this, but I don't. So I had to actually download my own ARC. I'm a lot better than I was a few months ago, Kelly. A lot better. Yeah, I was just saying before you came on that I ended up with COVID like right after my last live read. So yeah, it's just been kind of chaotic since then. So this is, I don't know if you've gotten your copy yet or you're waiting. I am gonna probably do a discount on this book in the future, but if you've got Kindle Unlimited, it is there. You can download it right now if you wanted to. Uh, yeah, cool. So we got quite a few people here. Thank you all for showing up. I know if you're on the East Coast or whatnot, it's kind of late. Yeah, thanks, Cherry. Yeah, it wasn't fun. Actually, I and all the kids got it, so yeah. I don't recommend. All right, so the chapter we're reading is called The Dwarf King. Pretty simple, obviously. So I'm gonna read the dedication just because I like it and it's relative because I wrote this while traveling. So dedication in this book is for wanderlust, change, and the randomness of unexpected adventure. For life would be far more boring without them. So, all right, let's get reading. Thanks, Jessica. All right, so chapter 1, The Dwarf King. The war was ending. Through a long conquest, a game of attrition, the king of the southern dwarves drew his army into a final standoff. A last stand, but one he did not have any intent on losing. Across Taria, the kingdoms of men had united. The many houses and their proud warriors rallied together, pushing the dwarven army into a narrow valley. King Turgon lay a trap. But his war was not sanctioned by the High Council of the Dwarven Empire. He did not have their support. He alone had gathered warriors to reclaim the lost kingdoms of his people. He alone had lost thousands. Now he had but one last chance to turn the war in his favor. Is everything prepared? Turgon asked. The three dwarves were standing in a dimly lit tent. Across a large table, they looked at a map of the valley. Several empty tankards were strewn about. At this point, they were drinking more than planning. There was nothing else left to decide. Turgon looked at Sulcor, a distinguished hammer song from the far northeastern city of Harodar. Did you hear me? Sulcor nodded. I heard you. I just don't understand why we were backing up. Why are we falling back? I told you, my counsel, and I felt like this is not the best decision, my king. And that is why I consider you my right-hand man. You won't back down, and I know that. But in this matter, I trust that I know better. There was another man, the oldest of the three dwarves there, sitting against the table and looking in the opposite direction. He was stroking his beard. We have enough dwarven dust to remove a mountain, he said. We've laid it all out just as you wanted. But the 500 warriors is far from the army we once had. The dwarf kicked a helmet that was on the ground, sending it flying against the other side of the tent. Then you mentioned mystics in your weird dream. I've already told you, Turgon said. We did everything we could to protect the flank, and those dreams mean nothing. I will not seek any mystic in a desert. Thanks for showing up, Josh. So sorry you had to leave. Sorry you're having to leave. Alright, let's see. The other dwarf growled. Protecting the flank wasn't our problem. We should have given the hill to them. My brother died because I could not hold that hill like you wanted. Turgon went around the table, grabbing this dwarf by the shoulder. Radok, I told you, you did not kill your brother. That bastard of a king killed your brother. That coward that hides behind his grand army. His confederation of smaller places. Turgon looked into Radok's eyes and could tell the dwarf did not want any of this comfort. In truth, he was lucky to even have these two still alive. What had begun as a border dispute and issues over trade had quickly spiraled between just his kingdom and one other kingdom of men, to now at least half a dozen different lords and kings. Sure, the border dispute required the razing of an entire city built over an ancient gateway to an old dwarf hold, but it didn't matter. Dwarves came before the race of men. He didn't want the war, but he would not back down to any king of men. The dwarf never really understood the purpose of kings as the race of men did it. How could you be a king, and yet your neighbor next to you is also a king? He didn't care much for any of them. Now, Turgon looked back at the battle map of the table. If the armies are moving in as our scouts report, then by morning they should be on our doorstep. They think they sunk our shipment of dwarven dust, but all they sunk were pallets of power. Yes, Sulcor said, and now across the center valley we've laid 24 traps full of it. Once their army is moving across the open terrain, we will ignite and split the entire force down the middle. I suspect we'll kill hundreds in the first explosion. Then, I will lead the charge directly in, my king. We do not have many, but we have enough, and in the heavy smoke and fire, our numbers will look like thousands. Look like thousands, not be thousands, Radok growled. My force of 5,000 climbed up that barren rocky hill, all for you not to come. Radok said, pointing at Sulcor. We had 5,000 against what could have been no more than 200 elven archers and 1,000 foot soldiers. Yet somehow every arrow flung atop that hill struck a dwarf. I lost the largest arm of our forsaken army trying to hold that place. A hill that now holds the tents of our enemies. We had bombarded the entire region back when we started catapults for 2 days straight. The very hill was on fire. When I ascended to the top, I could still smell the burning cinders of what was once a tree-topped region. Turgon was deeply concerned for Sulcor's state. Though he had been a captain under him for 20 years when the war began, he quickly ascended up the ranks, taking his place as general. He wasn't someone that should have ever held that rank. Radok was no highborn family, but that was what Turgon was about now, breaking free of the old molds of the Dwarven kingdom, letting actual action dictate placement within society. It was this exact reason that pushed away any hope of Dwarven allies. The cities of Micronach and Harkonach were too far away from their position, but they saw Turgon's insurrection as an act of defiance to the Dwarven king, far away in a region not even connected to Taria. Turgon was tired of being ruled by a king that sat on a throne yet never came over to see his supposed subjects. Even before the war, Turgon had sent many letters to the lords of Micronach and Harkonach, but they were never replied to. Now, Turgon had lost thousands of dwarves to besieging forces and knew that either the plan today would work, or any hope of an independent dwarven kingdom would fall into ruin. It is late, my friend, Turgon told Sulcor. Go, rest. Our scout will see this army coming far before it's in range of needing to be blown up. Take this moment. Have another ale. Go to sleep. Turgon expected Sulcor to have some type of retort or other snide comment, but instead the general simply nodded, finishing his tankard and dismissing himself. As Rhodok left the tent, Turgon and Sulcor glanced at one another. Before Sulcor nodded, it just moved on me. All right. The two of them decided to go outside. They were in a narrow gulch, flanked on either side by the towering Tychen Mountains. It was odd for Turgon to be in such a place, for he knew from the old books that detailed the ancient history of the dwarves, that just under their feet were the old halls of a lost kingdom. Though the entrance to such a place had long been lost, dwarves were particularly good at hiding entrances and veiling passages. So good, in fact, it led to the rise of the belief that there were dwarven doorways beneath some of the greater cities of men. That man had stolen dwarven technology and used it for themselves, accelerating their own knowledge without any credit given to the race of men for stealing what they stole. I know you're thinking about those damn ruins again. I told you to. I know. I confirmed there's an old observatory not too far from here. It's the top of a tower. My scouts found it 3 days ago and trying to see if there was another way out of the gorge in case we had to. Turgon snapped. Had to what? Retreat? There is no retreat from this place. Either we stop them or we die. We are not falling back. Of course, my king. A Hammersong would never seek to fall back, but, my king, I would hope you'd preserve yourself if needed. For generations, the Hammersongs have protected the royalty of the dwarven line. I am proud to be with you here in these troubling times. And I thank you for being here. But haven't they kicked you from the Hammersong in any official capacity? The king of Haradar does not care of my plight or your honor. We are both rebels in his eyes. That king is a fat pig. Some say he's gotten so fat he can't even fit out the main doors of Haradar. That oaf of a man thinks that he can command you when you are a better dwarf, ready to do what is necessary for your kingdom. I would gladly be here beside you, rebuked by my own order, than continually serving the fat, sour, ale-smelling pig-face. Your tactfulness with words never ceases to amaze me, good friend. I am encouraged that you have found the top of the observatory in the mountains. Once we deal with these pests, they keep continually trying to claim what isn't theirs and kill more of our brothers. We'll go together and see what secrets we can unravel. Sulcor smiled, pulling his pipe, filling the bowl. He offered Turgon the tobacco jar, but Turgon obliged, taking out his own pipe. You know what this army is missing? Sulcor asked. They both lit their pipes, a nearby torch on the tent. It's missing women. I haven't seen a woman in what has to be 5 months, Rhodok said. And those skinny toothpicks of the women of the race of men don't count. They basically look like infants. No real body hair to be found. Ha! Turgon began to laugh, and suddenly there was a strange smell in the air. It wasn't the pipe weed that they were both smoking, nor was it the smell of spilt ale on the outside of the tent. It was something else, subtle, unfamiliar, and boring. Tell you what, Turgon, a slightly drunken Hammersong said. As soon as this is all over, I'm getting married. Have half a dozen little Hammersongs. Sounds like a jagged blade suddenly struck the Hammersong directly in the throat. The dwarf grasped at his neck. Turgon grabbed his friend, pulling him directly into the tent as he heard the footfalls of unseen figures moving directly in on them. Turgon ran for the table, claiming his battle axe and bringing it about just as a cloaked figure appeared in the void moving directly at him. He swung, just missing the figure, who flipped directly on top of him. He dropped his axe, grabbing hold of the figure's head and squeezing it. The attacker flailed, and the dwarf managed to crack his skull. Was that an attempt on an assassination, foul milk drinker? He pushed the now dead attacker off of him and set up, claiming his axe. Sound the alarm, he shouted. He ran for where he had left Sulcor and found blood pouring from his neck. He put pressure on the wound and called out, Sound the alarm! Sound the horns! There were no responses. He heard more footfalls. He assumed at this point this would be his perimeter guards or other dwarves. He was still confused as to why no horns had sounded. And had he had a horn on himself, he would have done it himself. Rhodok, come now! But the dwarf did not come. Sulcor gasped, and the blood ceased its rhythmic pumping flow. The footfalls he heard caused him to turn around, and instead of dwarves standing in the doorway of the tent, he only saw more of the shadowy figures. He could not tell at this very moment if they were elf or of the race of men. He could only tell from their blades that they were the same as the first attacker. He barely had time to brandish his axe again as two attackers threw themselves upon him. Their blades jabbed into his armor but did not pierce. He pummeled one with the handle, shoving the other. Two more plinks against his chestplate from throwing knives did nothing. He brought his axe down, cleaving apart the man's skull that he had shoved. Another two daggers flew towards him, one bouncing up and cutting his face just beneath his eye. The other fell harmlessly to the ground. There was only one other in the actual room with him, the man he had pummeled. "Who sends you?" Turgon shouted. "Tell me, now." The man took up a mace, lunging at him. Turgon leaped aside, slapping him with the flat portion of his axe. The man rolled across the ground. Turgon ran, shoved his boot into the man's neck. Now 4 more attackers had entered. They were all holding ball and chain maces. He still could not see their faces, each of them veiled in black. "I don't know who you think you are, but the dwarves of the new empire shall never bow to you." He felt a sharp blow behind his knee. His armor was weak there. He fell to his knees, reaching around and grabbing hold of the figure who had slipped in behind him. He ripped the hood off and saw not an elf, but a man. The man spat at him. "Your empire is lost. Your war is done." Turgon grabbed the man by his face, dragging him close as the others swarmed him, striking his back over and over. "Bind him. They don't want him bruised, but bruise him. Just don't break him. We have him alive." Turgon couldn't see who was shouting commands. He felt his hands being bound, and he rolled into it, kicking and pushing his way towards the doorway. He was struck again, this time in the other knee, but he could still move it. Dwarven armor was remarkably protective, and his was of the high-smith forged mithril, nothing that was easily broken. Turgon made it to the outside, and the bright fires of the once carefully laid trap, and his plan to defeat the race of men, was being turned to ashes. Every tent was aflame. High above, archers rained down arrows, and all around him were his dead kinsmen. In the valley, the army of men approached. They would kill everyone that wasn't already dead. The triggers are nearby. His attackers were upon him again. He threw the first one he grabbed, forcing himself up as he caught the sight of the mechanism to ignite the dwarven dust. He'd blow them all to their gods. He just had to get there. Turgon sprinted, pushing through as from another tent he heard the shouts of a dwarf. "My king!" It was Raduk. "Ignite! Ignite it!" he shouted. Raduk barreled towards the triggers, too, both dwarves dodging arrows flying at them from above. He made it to the torch as Raduk opened the silver box containing the ignition lines. One spark, and it was done. An arrow struck Turgon in the knee. He fell, dropping the torch. It hadn't pierced, but the impact had been enough. Raduk went for the torch, but took an arrow to his right hand and then to his side. "You spineless elf lovers!" he shouted. Turgon pushed himself up as his attackers were on him again. The torch was stomped. Raduk growled, drawing a short axe and splitting open 2 attackers that were nearly on top of him. He ran for another torch and pulled it up. They just needed to get the flame to the spark lines. 3 more attackers came at him, and Turgon heaved his axe just as Raduk came running with the torch. A spear plunged into his friend's head from behind, and the dwarf fell dead. No. Turgon grabbed the torch, falling over himself to get to the ignition box when a boot struck him in the face. He couldn't see. His head was pounding. He felt them ripping his armor from him. "Bind him, now. Signal the artificers to check for explosives and get our armies out of that valley. We have what we came for, and the dwarves are gone. This king will not trouble us anymore." Turgon had failed. Turgon couldn't see anything. While he expected to simply be killed by his captors, instead they ripped his armor from him, removing every last piece of cloth and bounding his hands. He felt multiple hands grab onto him as he was thrown onto wood. He could smell a horse and could hear hushed whispers. "Just kill me," Turgon shouted. His voice was muffled through the covering on his face. Though the night air was cold, his breath against his face was warm. He could hear the mention of the word west, but nothing else. Soon, he heard the snap of reins, and it was clear to him that he was on the back of a cart. "Why won't they just kill me? Everything else is lost. I have failed all of my brothers and sisters. I failed everyone that has followed me." All Turgon could do now was think of everything that had gone wrong. He could still see the faces of his friends, even the ones from much earlier in the campaign. He knew it was risky to intentionally allow himself to be cornered, but he never thought of it ending like this. He wondered if he was being taken to the elves. He had heard of particularly harmful stories of torture by wood elves. Normally, most dwarves kept some type of small blade in their boot or otherwise tucked away under their beard. That wasn't too common, at least. But as it was, not only had his kingly armor been ripped from him, most likely to be melted down and made into something else. But his axe and many other smaller weapons, a few of them that he had had since he was very young, were gone. Why am I reminiscing of all that is lost? None of this matters. They can't expect to torture me and get any useful information. We have no home, no great hall to call ourselves kingly. I cannot believe it's happening like this. Has the god Thraka cursed me? Several hours went by and Turgon could hear a change in the ground. The wheels of the cart were now clicking and clacking as they went over, but the dwarf assumed was some type of cobblestone road. He could smell the sea, but only just so much. It was somewhere in the distance. The cart abruptly stopped. We have a wonderful bounty to bring our good king, a particularly sour dwarf, the cart driver said. Ah, we knew you were coming. We prepared the dwarf's happy little room. The king is otherwise busy tonight, but it will be a great sobering show for him tomorrow morning. Turgon could hear the gate of wherever he was now open as the cart pulled in and came to another stop. He once again felt himself grasped by many hands. He hoped they would remove his covering, so that he could at least see where he was, so he could recognize the architecture or stonework in general, maybe to guess where he now remained. His first thought was that he was at Vuric. It was one of the houses of men's seats of power. Though he had not had open hostilities with this particular nation, he did wonder what king had claimed him as his own. No doubt. This king was who orchestrated the attack and somehow thwarted his plans. Turgon wondered if someone close to him had actually betrayed him. There had been many that had joined his personal crusade over the years. He wondered of the stragglers and random sellswords that had appeared. It would simply have taken a bit more gold coin to convince one of them to betray him. He knew he would likely never know the answer to this. And as it was, it did not matter. As he was pushed and dragged, he attempted to resist. A swift kick to the back of his leg sent him to his knees, and he was carried several more paces before he heard a door slam. At this point, they removed his head covering. He could see nothing but barren wall and torches every few feet. He looked up at his captors, simple men wearing black hoods. They had no house, sigils, or identifying armor. He had no idea where he was. Though he continued to resist, not wishing to walk, they dragged him, taking him through a deep, deep passage with earthen ramps that went down and around several times before coming to another long hall of simple stone. It was at the very end of this passage that his room had been prepared. They not so much as reached the doorway that they threw him inside, sending him rolling across the floor. The door slammed shut. All right, well, that was chapter 1. Nice, lovely plan. It goes completely wrong. So let's make sure I didn't miss any comments because they pop up and they vanish. Cool. So I do hope you all enjoyed that. Like I said, we can definitely do more of these. I'm hoping to at least do chapter 2 and 3 and 4. And as I said, I've already got the second book written. It needs to be edited now. And then book 3 is in progress. These are all shorter. Oh, I'm glad you liked it. These 3 here will be kind of like the original Stormborn books. So Stormborn, Mage Soul, and Elfbane were all shorter. Right now, like this one here is about the same length as Mage Soul, and then the next book 2 is a little bit longer. I'm thinking book 3 will actually be closer to a full-size novel. But anyway, this all kind of leads to a bigger project I'm doing that I'm just calling Hammersong right now, where we talk about the Dwarven Hammersong School, and I kind of posted a bit about it in the Ascended Realm, talking about that project. It's going to be a trilogy. That first big book, it's going to be a big book, should be here in June. That should be, well, okay, it'll be written by June, and it'll take a little bit longer for production, because that one's going to be made into audiobook and everything all at the same time. Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks, Kelly, for showing up, and you too, Charity and Richard. I'm not sure I'm missing people. Yeah, cool. Hey, take the trilogy to the big screen. Yeah, you know what? You know somebody, let them know. That'd be cool. We don't really have any big dwarf movies out there, except I guess The Hobbit was technically more about the dwarves than The Hobbit, but always a lot of people don't like the Hobbit movies, but I actually enjoyed the dwarf side of it all and kind of some of the extra stuff they added in. I mean, it's not super true to the original novel, but yeah, I'm telling y'all. I mean, if you know somebody, put in a good word. There's actually some fellow authors I know uh, have their own publishing companies, and that's the next big step they're doing is they're doing production. So it's one of those things that who knows what the future holds. I mean, really, just put into work. I mean, that's really the key at this point. But yeah, so if y'all like this, I think it sounds very YouTube-ish, but I think there's a way you can follow for when I go live, so you get notifications. Because I know if you follow events, that there'll be a notification, but that otherwise that doesn't always happen. So there should be somewhere. I have no idea where it is on here because I'm on my phone. But yeah, if you haven't liked my page, at least follow it. I think that should give you a notification. And yeah, I tend to set up events, and normally it isn't 4 hours before the event like tonight. But yeah, anyway, thank you all for coming, listening to this chapter, and if you are intrigued by this book, go ahead and pick it up. It's in KU, so part of your subscription as it would be. It's not in paperback form yet, but I'll get it that way if you are someone who wants to hold a paperback. So anyway, thank y'all. Y'all have a great night. Okay.